With Election Day just one day away, voters across the Carolinas will be deciding who they want to lead their cities. And here in Charlotte, there's a ballot referendum that's been years in the making. Joining us live this morning, Dr. Michael Bitzer, political professor at Catawba College. Professor, nice as always. Thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
So the best way perhaps to predict the future is to look to the past. And you've actually done just that. You've crunched the numbers from last year's election, which was a presidential race. You've broken down how our city council districts voted in that. That sounds complicated, but what can we learn from those numbers as we head into tomorrow?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're trying to predict, my crystal ball cracked several election cycles ago, but we do know that voters are pretty reliable in terms of how they cast ballots in one election to the next election. So for Charlotte City Council, the districts 1 through 5, they voted 70% or greater Democratic at the presidential level. So it would take a Herculean lift for Republicans to try and win one of those districts 1 through 5. I think all eyes in Charlotte are really on District 6. That has been the most competitive district. Bakari 2 years ago won it by a little over 300 votes. And in 2024, District 6 performed at nearly a 60-40 Democratic dominance. So I think that that's going to be one to really kind of watch to see, is all local politics, is all politics still very localized? Or has Charlotte continued to trend towards nationalization, and it's just inevitable a matter of time before District 6 flips to the Democrats?
So is there any reason at all, speaking about District 6 specifically, to think that the Republicans have stopped the loss of support? They've been rallying against city leaders. We know that. Any reason to believe that there might be some change with that?
Well, I think with an open seat election, this is generally when you tend to see contests flip from one party to the other. But because Bakari's spouse, Bakari, is running, she will certainly benefit from that name recognition, and certainly the campaign infrastructure and resources that she has certainly would put a slight advantage to that, but it's not the same as incumbency. And we'll really have to kind of watch that particular district, and if it's fairly close in terms of the dynamics, particularly for early voting. Y'all mentioned the fact that we've got basically a record of early votes coming in a municipal election. About 3/4 of all the ballots cast 2 years ago have already come in terms of those early votes. So we'll have to see what turnout is like, along with how competitive that 6th district is.
One more question on that. Republicans have been criticizing Democratic city leadership now for months because of some high-profile violent crimes here in the city. Any data out there, any reason to believe that that actually might be working and could end up hurting Democrats in a municipal election?
I haven't seen any data, but certainly that could be a reason that if Republicans continue to control District 6 and win it tomorrow night, that might be part of the calculus that certainly plays into this. You know, a large portion now in that district are unaffiliated voters. And even though they are underperforming their citywide numbers, they oftentimes hold the key when it comes to making decisions like this. So I think in terms of the dynamics, who shows up is critically important, and what kind of factors are on the voters' minds in terms of the calculus of how they're casting their ballots really will have to wait until after the polls close tomorrow evening.
Well, we know that the council race is important. The mayor's race is important. But if we're being honest, there are some people who are probably going to go out to vote because of the transit tax, right? That's the big issue on the ballot that the voters are going to decide. We always talk about the turnout. Do you think that's going to impact whether or not this passes?
I think certainly it pretends to have a huge influence. You know, we're seeing so much record turnout with early votes. Are those votes that were typically cast on election day, or are these new voters coming in because of that issue that's driving a lot of it? We just don't know the dynamics internally of that. How many folks decide to show up tomorrow will be a major component. But when you've got a city that's basically 70-30 Democratic in the presidential election, I think that these kinds of numbers, even with the advantage that Democrats have, if the sales tax is seen as, more regressive in terms of that dynamic, that spread may tighten in terms of the victory of a potential referendum or the defeat of it. But likely you're seeing potentially with city leaders behind it, something that may be positive for the referendum's future.
Part of me, when I really get into the weeds, the deepest weeds of all, they say that like the midterms next year often engage about how the country feels about the party in power, feels about the president. And we're not there yet. We're still a year out from that. Is there anything that folks like yourself can glean from an off-year city election that applies to other parts of the country or the entire country?
Well, localized here in North Carolina, I would say odd year elections are just that. They're odd. When you're talking about a city that is so dominated by Democrats, this really doesn't give us a sense. What I'll be watching for is what is the percentage turnout of Democrats, particularly in an urban area like Charlotte. We have seen in midterms and presidential elections, turnout rates for Democrats, registered Democrats, are typically much lower than the state average. Does this energy in the national electorate and environment give them a boost? Do they show up this time? And could it potentially portend to a year from now? It's anybody's guess.
All right, so this is not on the ballot tomorrow, but let's talk about the government shutdown. As you know, millions of families lost their benefits over the weekend, starting in November. Historically, who gets blamed in the shutdowns?
Well, it can kind of be dispersed between two parties, but I think right now the national numbers are giving much more of the blame to Republicans, both congressional Republicans and the president. Catawba College, along with YouGov, will have a poll coming out tomorrow about this very issue, and I think we see it fitting into the national trends as well. So I think Republicans are pretty much bearing the brunt, but it's partisanly divided. Democrats are blaming Republicans. Republicans are blaming Democrats. Interestingly enough, independents are kind of split between holding one party or both parties accountable. So this kind of dynamic, if it continues to last, and it looks like it's going to exceed the last government shutdown, which was 35 days, this could have, again, building into the mantra of, is the president popular or unpopular? This is not helping his cause.
Let me get in one last question quickly. We reported this morning that the president is encouraging Republicans to end the filibuster, meaning they'd only need 50 votes to end the shutdown, not 60. People hear filibuster and their eyes glaze over and they fall asleep. Explain, though, if they were to do this, even Senate Republicans are hesitant, this would really have lasting impacts going into the future and how our government's run.
It would have a huge impact because Republicans are in control today. Maybe after next year's elections, Democrats are in control and they can turn around and say, what you did in 2025, we're going to do in 2027. And so this is kind of a tit for tat, ambition made to counter ambition. This puts the brakes on things. If they dispense with the filibuster, this could be a whole new dynamic in American politics.
All right.
Interesting.
Always learn a lot. By the way, the professor will be joining us Wednesday morning as well after the election, so we can do a recap of that. Professor Michael Bitzer. Professor, thanks as always. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Can't wait to talk to him on Wednesday.